There's something so addictive about the enemies to lovers trope in romance, and we kind of already know what it is that keeps bringing us back, right? The tension, the competitive flirting, the banter. We see two hot people who believe that they hate each other be thrown together, often against both of their wills, and the dislike for one another intensifies at first, but an obviously very important theme in this narrative arc is the big misunderstanding or the prejudices that the two main characters have about one another. Watching them overcome these emotional obstacles, including their own personal traumas, and seeing them learn to become vulnerable, seeing that as a strength, and then, of course, fall in love, is so satisfying. And today I wanted to talk about what makes enemies to lovers so compelling and why we, or I, keep going back to it. Good enemies can't simply dislike each other or be inconvenienced or annoyed by one another. You know, those two in the movie The Hating Game, did they ever really dislike each other on a deeply personal level, or were they just mildly annoyed by one another's personalities while they were at work? I mean, did it feel as though those characters started off at a place where there was room for them to grow throughout the movie? This is an example of this trope falling flat for me because, well, first of all, you could kind of sense the interest and the attraction through their posturing. And second, the hate wasn't really that believable, right? We've seen corporate competitiveness done really well, but in this case, it wasn't really believable. It reminded me of those books where the author's so impatient to get to the turning point moment that they rush through the hate and build-up phase. Anyway, we don't really get to know these characters either, so the stakes are fairly low, and because we don't know them, we can't really root for them, because who are we really rooting for? This is just some office jock in a suit type, and Lucy Hale is basically playing a Lucy Hale character. So the dislike for one another has to be rooted in something more, in two people having a fundamental difference in their understanding of the world, and that's usually how this narrative structure begins. So in Maxton Hall, James Beaufort, the rich playboy, is emblematic of everything that Ruby thinks is wrong with the school and society. So she hates him. His behavior when he tries to buy her silence, and then when he sabotages one of her parties, validates her low opinion of him. The writers are also not afraid of making Ruby quite unlikable at times. She's not always the most relatable character because she's so stubborn and self-righteous about being working class / poor that, well, I was annoyed with her for a lot of the first half of the show. But this was necessary. They both had to have really rough starting off points, and they did really hurt each other. So the eventual turning point, the apologies, the forgiveness, it felt really earned. For us to believe that the characters dislike each other, we also have to dislike them at certain moments too. And the best written characters, especially in this trope, are the ones where the writers aren't afraid to have us feel that. So their dislike for one another is deeply personal because Ruby poses a very real threat to James, Lydia, and their family because of Lydia's, I hesitate to call it an affair because this is a minor and a high school teacher, but that situation. And then later, when James encroaches on Ruby's space, he challenges some of her ideas and she feels like she risks losing control over a project that meant a lot to her. Not only that, but, you know, she's losing it to a guy like James Beaufort, of all people. And so there's this very deep-seated animosity there between the two as they both try to publicly humiliate and hurt each other. Another good example are Ben and Davy, who are academic rivals whose entire identities are wrapped up in their academic success. What's great about them is that there is a begrudging mutual respect there because they both are incredibly smart and they recognize that in each other. They still don't pull any punches though. Remember, Ben didn't even call Davy by her real name for the first few seasons, and Davy, well, knowing how much the model UN meant to Ben, had no issue sabotaging that, fueled by her own anger and misunderstanding, obviously. And who could forget one of our favorites growing up, Kat Stratford, who thought that she could see through Patrick's rebel outsider act. She was a staunch feminist, free thinker who rejected normal high school conventions like going to dances, dating boys, or even just socializing with people who she felt belonged to a status quo that she challenged. Falling for a bad boy would be the biggest cliche. Kat could never. So yeah, what all these couples have in common is that they can't simply fall for one another without potentially risking something, whether it's control or their own values. Obviously, if the basis of your rivalry with somebody is opposing values, liking that person might feel like a betrayal of those values, or so they think. Which brings us to our next part, the forced proximity. So our main characters are thrown together by circumstances quite out of their control. Guilford and Jane are in an arranged marriage. James is forced to join Ruby's school committee. Henry and Alex have to put on a public show of friendship after their royal cake incident. Even the old stuck in a room together trope works when it's done well. And we saw this with Josh Chen and Jules Ambrose and Anna Hong's Twisted Hate. I love Anna Hong, by the way. And I wish we could get TV shows or movies based on those books. Anyway, so very often our two characters are going to need to work together to get through this point. At first, this is where the hate kind of ramps up. Like, Ruby's quite territorial about her committee, and so she obviously feels defensive when James comes up with a better idea for the theme of the dance. Guilford and Jane need to consummate their marriage, or at least give the appearance of doing so they work together to buy themselves some time. And in the meantime, the tension and the chemistry between them is so undeniable that there are several moments where we think that they might kiss. Anyway, Guilford was a glorious flirt, and Jane doesn't pretend to not find him attractive. In fact, they bait each other a little bit, trying to see who will fold first, so we do get some really fun competitive flirting. It's always interesting to see how any potential attraction is handled between the two. In Twisted Hate, both Josh and Jules admit to themselves that the other is very attractive, but they both think that they're too smart to fall for it, right? Like, as though the attractiveness is a trap only poor saps would fall into. And they know better, obviously. Patrick, meanwhile, is paid to take out Kat, and at first he's a bit of a nuisance to her, as he does what he's paid to do, but he eventually does wear her down, and I mean that in the best way possible. By the way, I really loved the movie version of Red, White and Royal Blue. Didn't like the book at all. And they give us classic forced proximity by having Henry and Alex be trapped in a supply closet together, and that's where they both have their moments of vulnerability. This happens pretty fast, like in the first act of the movie, but the movie was kind of more about Alex learning about his sexuality and Henry's personal struggle, what with having a duty to his country. Anyway, typically being forced to spend time together means that these two get to learn more about one another, more than they otherwise would have, and perceptions kind of start to change. So then we get part 3, which is the moments of vulnerability. This was such a great scene in Maxton Hall. Oh my goodness, that show is so good. When Ruby went to go apologize to James, she'd always been a bit of a know-it-all, and this is a big moment for her, where they almost instantly see each other in a different light without their heckles up, as they are all the time, and they actually share a laugh. Of course, we see a major emotional shift in James, who goes home and he draws Ruby. She's touched by his gesture in, genuinely wanting to help her, and they do have fun together. She sees that he's actually generous, he's a talented artist, and not just a spoiled rich kid. It's inevitable, since they spend so much time together, that our main characters start to actually learn more about each other, and they're forced to question some of their previous assumptions about one another, and most importantly, themselves. Take Kat. While her relationship with Patrick is the focus of this enemies to lovers trope, I think that the relationship transformation that happens with her sister, Bianca, is just as, if not more important to the story as well. Their relationship had been strained because of Kat's ideological absolutism. While she championed a woman's right to choose, she indirectly denied her sister that same right. And yes, this was out of protectiveness, but she was also kind of projecting her own fears and insecurities onto Bianca. And, her misguided teenage brand of feminism and independence was used to push people away, and she would be pretty combative for no reason. It was really funny when she crashed into Joey Donna's car, but if we really think about it, it was actually kind of an entitled and unreasonable thing to do, and of course her father was on the hook for it. So the way that she lived her life had made her quite isolated, and her relationship with her sister suffered because of it. Ruby also risks missing out on a great friendship. There's this moment where she tells her friend that she knows that they're only friends because the girl's parents lost their money, and so it's a really important, pivotal series of moments for her to grow up and realize that no, she does not have it all figured out. And very often, what she accused other people of doing, she herself was doing, judging people without really getting to know them or giving them a chance. So eventually James's life also becomes about more than lacrosse, girls and parties, and he's also not seeing his participation in the committee as a punishment anymore. He grows to care about the actual event. And obviously, of course, we have that great moment where he saves Ruby from drowning and she opens up to him about her traumas. And so very often, what goes hand in hand with the vulnerable moment is, one of the characters saving the other or making a grand sacrifice for the other in some way. And it doesn't even need to be a grand gesture. It just needs to really be a meaningful one. The very early breakthrough for Ben and Davy comes when he has dinner with her family, and it actually starts out as a pity invite from her mom, and Davy's very much against it. But over the course of the dinner, not only does Ben get to experience and enjoy the warmth of a family dinner for the first time in years, he chooses to protect Davy in a moment with her mom. Both he and Davy can be pretty ruthless in one-upping each other, and he's desperate to prove himself, and this would have been the moment to get back at her, but he doesn't. He chooses not to potentially hurt her because things between them have fundamentally changed, and I've always loved Ben's awareness of that and him rising above Davy's nuke sabotage. Never Have I Ever is Mindy Kaling's best work, and you can quote me on that. Anyway, at this point in the story, so much of what the initial conflict is based on starts to crumble away as the two open up to one another, even though they're not openly in love yet. But we're getting there. And the slow burn is really the best part because we get a lot of yearning, we get a lot of angst, and some internal conflict. Which brings us to part 4, the realization and the turning point. So when Josh Chen realizes that he's in love with Jules, it hits him out of nowhere and he's like, oh, mother. So the happy ever after is still a long way off because after they realize it, there'll be another obstacle that they both need to get over in order to be together. In Kat and Patrick's case, this obstacle is the big deception, right? The fact that Patrick was actually paid to take her out. Like, she was very suspicious of going to prom in the first place, but she went anyway. And then she finds this out. Jane and Guildford finally admit their feelings to each other and they consummate their marriage, but the fact that he's equine poses an existential threat. And of course, in Red, White, and Royal Blue, Henry, heavy as the head that wears the crown, Henry, even though he's the spare, doesn't think that he can be with Alex in the way that he deserves because he has this duty to his country. To be fair, his grandpa did want to push him back into the closet as if the survival of the royal family depended on it. So pacing is really important here because if we take too long to get to this point, it's not as effective. And I've always thought that Bridgerton season 1, I love it, but it has this problem for me. The central romance wasn't actually my favorite. Simon made Daphne unhappy for a really long time. By episode 5 of 8, they're married, miserably so, and they have been unhappy up until that point. And so on their wedding night, when he gives her the I'm yours speech, it felt like A, it was slightly too late, or B, that we skipped a step. And I don't know, did I get the sense that he was really secretly pining for her? I'm not sure, because they wrote this character to be so stoic and there wasn't enough yearning, especially not on his part. And to me anyway, I don't know, you can't go from forced to marry, not talking to each other, we're having separate bedrooms, to I burn for you, with like nothing in between, right? A really good example of a turning point, I think, was the one between Damon and Elena from The Vampire Diaries. Now, I'm a Stelena fan through and through, but I really enjoyed the build-up to the Damon and Elena romance. It had been happening for a while, like slowly slow burning for a while since Miss Mystic Falls, but there was that motel scene before their very first kiss, and it feels like that moment stretches on forever, but like in a good way, because we all know what's about to happen and the tension is almost too much to bear. Anyway, so as I mentioned, there's generally one last obstacle before our protagonists make the final love declaration, and this is when they need to take a leap of faith. Kat, who was obviously previously hurt by Patrick, lied to, actually, by him, she stands up and she publicly declares her feelings for him. Kat had always taken some joy in the fact that people found her kind of scary, and she purposely pushed them away. So for her to do this, to show her emotions, you know, other than disdain and anger, in front of everybody, and have that be a moment of strength for her, was pretty significant. James, after breaking things off with Ruby, thinking he's protecting her, finally comes clean at Oxford, and they agree to no more secrets. I will say, as critical as I am of Daphne and Simon, the entire Hastings Ball scene lives in my head rent-free, and it's what ultimately saves them for me a little bit. The music in the scene, the cinematography, it has no right to be that good. And then generally, after our couple has gotten through their one big obstacle, we have a happily ever after. I mean, in the case of Maxton Hall, we have season 2 coming later on this year, so more going on there. But yeah, that is the enemies to lovers trope. There's so many couples that I've left out, like the original enemies to lovers, Elizabeth and Darcy, those two cuties from the original Scam, a show that I've been meaning to get back into, like Buffy and Spike, like Nadia and Guzman, between seasons 1 and 3, that was really good. Anyway, yeah, like I don't usually make videos like this, so I don't really know how to end it. But who knows, like I think it'll be fun to do this with a few other tropes that I really like, especially in romance. If you have any recommendations for enemies to lovers, whether it's books, TV shows, or movies, feel free to let me know. I never tire of it. Like, yeah, feel free to share your thoughts, and thank you for watching.